What's the cringiest worst examples of butt kissing you've seen at work? I called my boss by his first name when I started out, and my co-worker scolded me after he walked away saying no, you call him Mr. So-and-so. She'd also always go out and buy him his lunch. Likely cut your maternity leave short and he underpays you. What's in it for you? The only time I've ever done the Mr. So-and-so was when I was a supervisor and was messing around with a co-worker. He took the tone of a put upon inferior and said something like, I did the thing you asked me to, boss man sir. I fired back with a that's Mr. Boss man sir, and then we laughed about it. And then BSP. I can't imagine someone who does that seriously. Jesus. The worst was a guy I worked with at my last job doing HVAC. Because the boss was going to get a full report on whatever crew he worked with that day. If you said something negative about the boss, he was going to tell. If you were a minute or two late coming back from lunch, he had a pic on his phone with the timestamp. If you didn't hang something perfectly level or straight, he'd toss a level on it, snap a pic, send it to the boss. He also came in every Sunday and washed all the trucks, with no pay, to make sure we kept a good image. Found out eventually it had nothing to do with the job. He was just dating the boss's daughter and he was trying to prove himself. Had a co-worker in my marketing team who was a lead designer. He was often pretty dismissive of junior level employees, or would try and one-up everyone's stories. You tell him you stayed at a hotel at the beach over the weekend. He tells you he stayed in a penthouse at the same beach for a whole week. He also always tried to be in proximity of senior staff members and would brag loudly if they were within an earshot, hoping they would hear how awesome his life is, I would assume. One day, a VP from our company had come up to talk to somebody in a pod close to ours. The pretentious designer loudly asked me about my weekend. I gave him an answer. He responded loudly, one-upping my answer, noticed the VP wasn't paying attention to him at all, quickly got up, hovered behind the VP while he was talking to the other employee. Eventually the VP cracked a joke and the designer let out the loudest, fakest laugh I've ever heard, startling the VP, who up until then was not aware that this guy was standing behind him. VP just got an awkward close-lipped smile, quickly nodded his head, and walked away. Designer came back to our pod, sat down, and started working as if he was never mid-conversation with me. I work with a woman who threw a baby shower for our managers, not a manager though, wife, thrown in our office. Meanwhile, her equally pregnant friend in the office was invited to the party but received no shower of her own or even an acknowledgement from the suck-up. Funny thing is, everyone hates the manager, so nobody really stayed longer than they had to. Also, she tries to call us out for not getting gifts for the manager on National Bosses Day, as if him being paid more to frick things up for us isn't enough already. Co-worker would talk up the boss during meetings. Mrs. Boss, you're the smartest person I've ever known. I wish I had some of your brains. This sounds like something you'd read on a title card in a silent movie. Mayo. A colleague tried to feed the manager during lunch saying just one more bite please. Both female but still, was so embarrassed to witness that. Hey boss, here comes the airplane. Other receptionist at my work is a huge butt kisser. Calls herself head receptionist when she's really just a part-timer that doesn't do her job right. Will constantly have meetings with the bosses and take credit for things other people do. Most recent example is when a client brought us donuts and left them at the front desk. I was in a room but heard the convo between the client and her about the donuts being a gift. Then heard her walk to the back and announce to our boss that she, receptionist, ordered them donuts because they work so hard. This struck a nerve. Taking credit for something that a paying customer did out of kindness seems sociopathic. Fake laughter at the boss's jokes. Laughter that goes on for way too long so that even the boss notices and gets PO'd. Man, when I became a manager all my jokes got so much funnier. I freaking loved it. Guy at my job would counteract his crappy performance with butt kissing. It helped him keep his job for a very long time, until he told someone to frick off on a recorded call. These are the absolute worst people. If someone is good at their job and kisses butt, that's still bad, but whatever. However, if they suck at their job and kiss butt to not only keep their job, but I've seen a couple of times butt kissers who suck at their jobs get promoted. That's the absolute worst. You lower the morale of everyone else doing their job well. This sucker at my work was just promoted because he's an butt kisser. Constantly jumps over people to perform a task, but only when the manager is around. That kind of crap. Recently, he wrote on our manager's door. He has a dry erase board for messages. Manager's name is the greatest. Freaking cringe. I hate this dumbass, and I respect my manager less for falling for it. Stories like this make me lose more respect for the manager than the butt kisser. The butt kisser has a goal, getting ahead, but any manager who falls for this bulls is an imbecile. Not a specific one, but I had a colleague we nicknamed Ankles cause that was all you could see sticking out the boss ass. That's probably an incorrectly used apostrophe. Now my wife is giving me a weird look because I said ankles out loud and then laughed. My boss sent me out to get her boss a birthday card and gift, which was all fine and good as it meant an escape from her for an hour or so. The card was nothing out of the ordinary, but the cake was very fancy and not your typical office birthday cake. I then had to swing by Tiffany's to pick up the bracelet that was the actual gift, just from her to her boss. Expensive gifts to colleagues, let alone managers, were not the done thing there, and it wasn't even like it was a bank or anything high-end, so it seemed horribly out of place and blatantly butt-kissing. Me and two of my co-workers pitched in for a small gift for our boss once, and even then we all said it felt weird spending even a little money on your boss, knowing full well how much more they make than you. I can't imagine dropping Tiffany bracelet money in order to impress someone who already lives above my pay grade. Part of my job is delivering children's books to some agencies to hand out. One month our executive director didn't like the book that came in. There were a couple lines she felt were inappropriate. She asked me not to deliver them and she would order new books. A coworker of mine noticed I didn't deliver them and took it upon herself to do it. The executive director doesn't care for her and she was trying to get on her good side. She thought she could make herself look good by making me look bad. I thought she went to lunch. Had no idea she was out there trying to do my job. She came back and proudly tells others that she did my job and maybe now the director will be pleased. She came to my desk and angrily says, in earshot of the director, "I just went and delivered the books that you never delivered. I shouldn't have to do your job on top of everything I'm already doing for this agency." I just looked at her and said, well, that was dumb. She went to the director next and told her that she delivered the book since she seen it hadn't been done and asked if there were any other tasks she could do for her. The director was pissed. She was planning on returning those books so she could order different ones. They weren't labeled with our logo yet either, which she would have seen if she checked. It's required that we put our logo on them. The director tore into her for overstepping her boundaries and trying to make me look bad. She tried so hard to kiss butt and it backfired big time. Oh, and I was praised in front of her for listening. I love stories like this. Thank you for sharing your co-worker being shut down. This was actually pre-work. Canada's largest airline had an unqualified secretary screening the applications for pilot positions. She would determine who got interviewed and who got put to the bottom of the pile. Some guys would send her chocolates, literally, and get an interview 2 days later, where others had waited years. Others would send flowers. It was close to criminal the way she got bribed, and there were a lot of examples. She was finally heavily demoted for her actions, but she should have been crap canned. At my job there was this guy who kept buying his direct supervisor lunch every day. One time the supervisor asked him why he kept doing it. He responded with, "The king's gotta eat." Everyone in the immediate area cringed super hard at that, including the supervisor. That sounds like something Andrew Bernard would say. Happened recently at work. One particular co-worker is almost insufferable with his behavior. Constant trumpet blowing with his lackluster work. Endless comments about how much money he has, degrading other team members to get some kind of moral high ground and get in good graces with management. What's more cringe is his posts and interactions on the team member WhatsApp group. Really fake or cheesy crap that definitely is not his character at all. Basically everything that he does involves trying to crap on someone to look better at his job. Anyway, he thought he was top crap after one of the managers recently left and applied to take the advertised duty manager role. He was shut down almost immediately, and apparently one of the night managers straight up told him that they did not want him to work nights due to nobody wanting to work with him. At least he was put in his place eventually. I had this coworker at Target that would go on the biggest power trip for no reason whenever he was on guest services. Guest services is the people usually at the front of the store where you do returns and stuff like that. For anyone that doesn't know, we all would alternate doing it, and it was usually with a manager. There's literally nothing special about it besides that it was slightly more tolerable than being on a register. Whenever said coworker would be on guest services, he would think he was manager and was the most unbearable person for the hour he would be doing it. One shift I was walking to the bathroom, which you had to walk past guest services to get to, and he went out of his way to loudly ask me where I was going in that managerial tone I'm sure you're all familiar with, as if he was a manager. I just looked at him and kept walking. He would do similar things like that to everyone, and it was just the cringiest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen someone become such a kiss bus because they did a slightly different role from everyone else for an hour, and everyone did guest services like we literally just alternated throughout the shift. My fucking manager, holy crap. He is head of our engineering department. Takes credit for everything when reporting to directors. Overpromises on results and timelines without knowing how long things actually take. Best experience I've had. We had a financial year-end meeting and I am in charge of compiling all production figures and creating a clean report. Even went out of my way to produce some stats to see how we can evaluate ourselves and improve what we do. This sucker starts presenting this thing, with me in the room saying I this and I derived it like that. The director asked him a question about one of the datasets and he did not know and sat there blank. So I just spoke up and explained how I did it. Could see some other people around the table were choked up. Best dang feeling. Former retail manager here. Got a new district manager and we heard he was going to be visiting us. But it was supposed to be a secret. We all put in a little extra elbow grease and were on extra high alert to try to make a good first impression. While none of us had actually met the DM before, our company had an internal social media, and we had looked up his profile. We were also in between store managers at this point, and our operations manager really wanted the job. OP was also way less slick than he thought he was. DM finally walks into our store, picks up a random item and gets in line at a cash registers. OP rings him up personally and lays on the customer service thick, acting like he didn't know who the DM was. My department was on the 3rd floor, and DM makes his way up there. I greet him with a hi boss. He asks me if I greet all customers like that, and I let him know that I know who he is. Well, we walk my floor for a while, and he asks me to take him to the office. We get down there, and OP is at the store manager's desk, and when he sees the DM says, "Oh, hello sir, was there a problem work your purchase? I'd be happy to make it right if there is." The look on Up's face was priceless when the DM replied, "Do I look like a moron? Have some integrity. Also, that isn't your office." These are my favorites when employee does stunts like this to impress the boss and the boss shoots them down with fatality, hahaha. I saw a weird reverse butt kissing experience at an old sales job. It was outbound telemarketing. Warm calls thankfully. We'd call, confirm interested parties for mortgage refinance and then transfer to the licensed folks to do the actual work. Like any lead-based sales system, the fresh leads were usually the best leads. It started with one person, and eventually their whole family joined the sales floor. Their numbers started above average, and then got into unrealistic. What I mean is that our sales floor goals were 400-500 dials a day and 10 transfers. These individuals would have 30-40 dials a day and 28-35 transfers daily on average. As more of the family signed on and their averages rose, everybody else's averages dipped. Many of us even below quota. Didn't take long for us to notice that this family found out that by manipulating the dialing program to assign only fresh leads to themselves and assigning older leads to everybody else, they could get first call on the hottest leads and have higher transfers as a result. This meant large paychecks for themselves and severely reduced pay for the rest of us. The problem is that we got a new manager around the time. He didn't get sales. He also didn't care that this family was abusing the sales system. They made him look good to the management at the home office, since they were proof that 10 transfers a day was too little since their best were transferring 3 to 4 times that amount a day. This made this family of employees very valuable to him. All attempts to even the playing field would be met with punishment. Any attempt to report any problem with that family to him would be any attempt to go above his head at all would be termination on grounds of mutiny. Eventually they put themselves into a death spiral. Since company policy had a specific through line for not hitting quota, they eventually had to fire most of their competent, hard-working sales force. This caused a dramatic drop in dialing since there wasn't anyone left to pick up the data slack. This meant that the sales floor was no longer in contractual compliance with the home company, which resulted in penalties. Their reputation was already well known at this point, so they couldn't get anybody competent hired, and anyone they did bring in didn't stay long. Eventually they had to close the office since the penalties from the home office became too large to keep the office open, and even that family lost their jobs. TLDR. Family of opportunists gained the sales system to their advantage, and management bent over backwards to protect them, eventually costing dozens of people reliable work. Manipulating the dialing program. A guy I worked with at a help desk figured out if dialed his full number on line 1, picked it up on line 2, then conference the 2 lines together, the phone status system would show him on an inbound support call. He got busted because he got greedy and used the trick too much and also bragged about it a little too loudly, and the bosses heard. One of my coworkers knew the branch manager was obsessed with Magic the Gathering, so he pretended to have connections with someone at Wizards where he got free cards. Turns out this guy was actually just buying the cards. One of my other co-workers saw him buying a booster box at a Walmart nearby. He was literally bribing the boss for favors with Magic cards that he paid full price for. The sad thing? It freaking worked. Everyone knew this dude got preferential treatment. When he fricked things up, manager dude would always cover for him. He got promoted to a position he definitely didn't deserve over someone else who was way more qualified. We even tried letting bossman know that he was just buying the cards at the Walmart nearby, but he didn't believe us. So yeah, a few thousand in Magic cards got the butt kisser raises worth 5x that. Dang, I'd like to think I'm above being bribed with booster boxes, but if I have at least one honest bone in my body, I'd have to say I'm probably not. My co-worker was an butthole. She was rude to anyone she viewed as beneath her in her imaginary org chart, and would kiss the butt of anyone above her. She was rude and condescending to me, literally every day. It was the most petty crap. She made fun of the lab coat I wore, the jokes I made, the food I ate, my alma mater, just about anything. You could tell she had been bullied as a kid and was never a bully because she had no tact or wit and her insults were weak and cringy. Well, one day, she has the audacity to say that I wasn't a real chemist because I don't work with solvents or do extractions, and I took it personally. She said that I wouldn't be able to perform an SOP for pesticides, which was dumb because SOPs are literally standard operating procedures and are written to reproducible by anyone, within reason. After 6 months of putting up with her crap, I had enough and went to HR. My co-worker was reprimanded. The owner of my lab told me that he considered her actions a fireable offense, but we were in the middle of an audit which she was handling, so he kept her on. At the Christmas party, my boss explicitly referenced, though not by name, how saying your co-worker and not a chemist is bad and that we all should be proud of traits that make us great and work on traits that make us bad. She left right after the speech. A few weeks later was the owner's birthday. We have a tradition where a card is put in the break room and everyone can give best wishes to the birthday person and sign. My co-worker wrote the most long-winded message to the owner about being so happy to work at the company and be mentored by him. It got really sappy. She said that she looked forward to working with him for years to come. He fired her that Friday. That is amazing. I'm glad your boss saw right through her. As a blackjack craps dealer in a casino, I had a floor manager that hated me. The feeling was very mutual. One day I was secret shopped and received a 100% with some outstanding personalized comments on it. The higher ups were so impressed that the head of table games came down from on high to give me 50.00 worth of cash gift cards. Unheard of. We normally get 5.00 buffet vouchers. This all took place in front of the floor who hated me. This reaches in his pocket and hands me a card for an entry into a drawing for a 10.00 cafe credit and tells me I did good. Sucker used my 15 seconds of fame to make himself look good to the debt head. It kinda backfired when I handed it back and said no thanks. I know you don't mean it. Debt head hauled my butt upstairs and asked what I meant. I didn't need the job, so I unloaded every single instance of harassment, sexual harassment, HR investigations, and backed them all up. COVID hit while he was suspended and he was not invited back when they reopened. Today I found out I can be a secret shopper while gambling. My immediate supervisor and I were doing a job off-site at a partner company's lab, like an hour's drive from our company, and we finished our task at like 4:30, and I was like, frick it, let's end the workday. He insisted on calling the director and inform him we were done working off-site, and ask him to officially give us permission to go home a half hour early. The director was like, you called and bothered me to ask this? Just go home. Seriously, you two are out in the field because you're supposed to be able to make decisions like this on your own. Your last paragraph reminded me of my first boss ever. He taught us that you should take 30 seconds to think and be a trigger puller. He was happy to help and train you, but explained that you're hired to make decisions yourself, not called to ask permission for everything you do. Increased responsibility is great when it also means more autonomy. The girl my boss hired to help me and I trained started having an affair with the second in command. For the next year I got to watch her feed him fruit with her mouth while doing almost nothing all day. She would go on 2-hour lunches, got promoted, a raise, and I had to continue to take the load of the work she was initially hired for. I know the feeding fruit with her mouth is supposed to sound sexy, but I'm just picturing her mama birding him. I used to work with a girl who would always change her voice whenever she would interact with our boss to try and seem sexy. Her voice would literally go up several octaves in tone and she would adopt this valley girl type of inflection. If he wasn't around she talked completely different. I feel like this is me with my customer service voice. I heard Suaru many people trip over themselves to say we're ageist so THNK filed to HAV jobs at the beginning of the pandemic when my old company was slashing benefits, pausing raises, conducting layoffs, requiring 12-hour shifts, all while literally any complaint or negativity was met with that line. There were a handful of times when leadership got called out on a lie or a hypocritical statement and some middle manager would spring into action to defend them. Having a job is great, but don't sell out your dignity so some rich tech bros can get richer. Glad I got out of there. I hate that asking for fair treatment and fair wages is considered ungrateful by people who would directly benefit from fair treatment and wages. I work for a guy that has multiple companies, hotels and event halls. Due to COVID, one of his restaurants acts like a canteen for all of his employees. They prepare one meal for every day, and that's it. Cue in this Monday. I went to the restaurant and on the way, I ran into my boss who was also on his way to have lunch. So we went together. When we entered the restaurant, my boss asked the chef what was on the menu. He told him and directly followed up with, but if you don't want it, I can prepare you something else. I didn't think anything about it at first, because let's be real here. My boss earned every bit of respect, not only due to his handling of the whole COVID situation. He didn't fire anyone, even though the event halls and restaurants are basically closed since over a year now. Not a single person. Doesn't matter if part-time or full-time. Not even temporary helper. Long story short, my boss said to the chef that he's fine with the menu and don't need something special. The other guy followed up with, you sure? I can prepare you something. That's really not a problem. And again, my boss said, really, it's fine. I eat what we have. We got our plates and sat down. Not even 5 minutes later, the chef came over to our table with a plate full of 6 different meats, vegetables, fries, food worth of 3 to 4 servings. My boss looked at him, looked at the plate and just said, okay, just leave it here then. The second my boss was done with his lunch, the guy ran over and took his plate back to kitchen. Only his, not mine. What was fine because canteen service doesn't include this anyways and I was not expecting him to clean after me. He came back with one coffee. When my boss asked, "Can you please bring a second one?" he just glared at me but did it anyways. Shortly after the coffee, he got a dessert for our boss. And again, nothing for me. Our boss asked him to please bring a second one, because otherwise it would be rude towards me. But I just declined and said I was full already, and I was actually expecting him to spit into it. His gaze said it all. It was overall really uncomfortable for me the entire time. He jumped through a lot of hoops to please our boss, who didn't want anything special in the first place. And he had this burning hate in his eyes towards me, because I was sitting on the same table. That's scary. Kudos to your boss though. He sounds like he cares. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.